I'm joined now by Paul Gallagher, General Manager of Buswell's Hotel in Dublin, by consumer columnist with Independent News and Media Sinead Ryan, and by Eoghan Corry, Editor of Travel Extra. Before we deal with some of the questions raised in that report, Eoghan, there's a lot of talk about Patrick's Day and the festival and the parade and whether or not it should be cancelled. Do you think it should go ahead?
I think it definitely should go ahead. The impact of cancelling the parade would be so devastating through the towns and villages of Ireland, and economically and in sort of people's cultural life, that it would be disproportionate to the risk involved. And one of the reasons I'm saying that is that people travel anyway. We are not an autocratic society like China. The Italian fans are arriving in tomorrow for the match that is not taking place. They are still coming. The English fans will be going to Rome. It's not a case like it was even at the time of Foot and Mouth, where cancelling an event would curtail the travel. The travel is happening anyway, and people overreacting to the threat, because the threat in scale is not that large. Actually sends out the wrong message and creates more distress, which would actually, when you cut down economic activity, you cut down income for our health services.
Sure, but if you cancel the parade, you would be sending a signal and maybe those people wouldn't come.
But is it about that signal, or is it about allowing the economic life of the country and cultural life of the country to continue?
Okay. Sinead, talking about the economic life of the country, if I'm told to self-isolate and I go home and stay at home for 2 weeks, am I going to get paid? Do we know? Are people going to get social welfare? How's all that going to work? Do we know yet?
It's not. Well, a lot of that, of course, isn't clear, because to a large extent it'll be up to employers. I mean, we saw two massive employers during the week, Google and Twitter, sending their people home. Indeed followed after that, just saying work from home, do what you can. Now, obviously, if you're going to work from home and that's a possibility for your company and your company can sustain that, well and good, you'll be paid for your day's work. But you can't expect SMEs around the country, for instance, to send their people home and continue to pay them if they're not able to work. In terms of the state, Leo Varadkar came out and said, well, he wants to offer supports to people in that position. Now, that lacks as much clarity as anything else we've heard about this thing. I don't know what that means. Illness benefit is paid by social welfare, which is fine, but you can only apply for it after 6 days, and you have to be ill. You have to get a doctor's cert. So what happens, for instance, if you're sent home to self-isolate, you're not sick, and hopefully you won't be, and you're off work for 2 weeks. And for self-employed people, it's an absolute disaster, because they've no safety net.
Yeah, now the civil and public servants have been told that they it won't be taken out of their allocated sick leave for the year. It'll be a special treatment, but that's not an option for a lot of employers.
You'd expect that for public servants. Of course they're going to say that. I'm not worried about people like that, because of course they'll be paid out of the public purse. It's people, who are freelancers, people who are running small businesses. We saw restaurant owners there. What about those waiters, cleaners, people on 10 quid an hour? Those jobs really matter, and they need that money very, very badly. So it's not entirely clear what's going to happen. A functioning government would be a tremendous help at the moment, I think we do need a lot more clarity around that stuff.
They are. I think the government is meeting unions and employers tomorrow, and has promised that there'll be an announcement on Monday, so perhaps we'll know then. Paul Gallagher, General Manager of Buswell's, are you starting to feel the hit yet?
Yeah, I think we've noticed some cancellations, certainly in the last 2 or 3 days. Would have lost some business for March. And probably our forward reservations, so new reservations for the rest of the year, certainly have slowed down, and to a worrying degree have slowed down. I'm hearing that right around the country, so a lot of very nervous people in business right now.
And we saw some of them in Barry Cummins' report, and obviously the margins are tight as it is, so you really can't, the industry really can't afford much of a hit.
No, it can't, and this is the worst probably time of the year really, because as Eoghan has alluded, St. Patrick's Festival is the kick-start to the season. Airlines have plenty of capacity. What we find now is people are afraid to fly or choosing not to, so not showing up for their flights, so you have sort of half-empty flights. And that sends out a very worrying signal, I think, for everyone really, that the risk is so great that people are changing behaviour.
And what are you doing as an employer? I mean, presumably you have contingency plans in place for if anything untoward happens. But if an employee was told to self-isolate, would they still get paid?
We would. I mean, they're my biggest asset, my employees. So there's absolutely no way I would leave them out on the lurch. So we would certainly make sure that we play our part and look after them as well as we can.
Yeah.
These are unusual times. This has never happened before. So even a foot and mouth when the St. Patrick's Festival was postponed to May, we all played our part, the whole of society. We all had wet doormats with disinfectant. Really, there's a big role for everybody in Ireland to play here to try to get this thing under control, change our behaviour, that we don't go out when we're sick, and hopefully get a fire break that we can say, look, we've got beyond this over maybe in 3 or 4 weeks' time. We've all put in a lot of hard work here, and then hopefully we can get past this really serious point right now.
Eoghan, straws in the wind for the travel industry. Flybe, which flew into Belfast City Airport, gone bust. Aer Lingus offering workers unpaid leave if they want to take it, so presumably they think there's going to be reduced capacity. And the International Air Transport Association said coronavirus could be as damaging for the industry as the financial meltdown in 2008.
Yeah, intercontinental travel has been bleeding for about 6 weeks. Airlines with big exposure, Cathay Pacific, put 27,000 staff on unpaid leave. The Middle Eastern airlines very exposed to it. Finnair very exposed. Lufthansa all grounding aircraft. What happened in the last week is inter-European travel came down. To give an example, Ryanair at this time of the year would take €3.5 million a week in bookings. It went down to 2.5 million very suddenly last week. Ryanair, always very quick to react. They started cutting 25% of their Italian flights. Now, all the airlines are experiencing things like that. They are looking at Easter as being, like, Easter's fairly heavily booked, and the summer is looking well booked. But if the forward bookings don't fill out, for example, the low-cost airlines would see at the first of every month would see about 85% of the seats for that month sold, 65 for the next month, down to 35 for 3 months out. It's quite a close-in booking pattern, and what they're really worried about is that interference with that short booking. The bookings are stopping. What that does is any of the airlines who are in trouble already, Flybe being the obvious example, depending very heavily on their cash flow, they run into trouble quickly. Okay. They won't be the last.
No, that's the industry. What about the poor consumer? If I've booked a flight and I decide I don't fancy it, if
you self-cancel, you have nowhere to go. Where if you are told, if the DFA decides somewhere like there is an issue with, they closed down all of China, they didn't close down all of Italy, so compensation becomes quite complicated in that case. The other thing is the disruption cover. It's available. It's not part of your travel insurance. It costs about €17 extra for an annual policy, 10 for an individual trip, and it doesn't apply till a week after your purchase. So it's a really good idea to get that, because we could be looking at a lot more disruption before this all clears up.
Okay, and finally, Sinead, Paul was talking about, hopefully we can put in the fire break and hopefully avoid the worst of it. But there are a lot of companies out there that are going to be very nervous because their supply chains are threatened, their ability to get goods off the island could be threatened. It really could get very, very serious.
It can, and like the HSE can do their absolute level best to say, stay calm, everybody, do this. The politicians can reassure and all that. But consumers have a kind of a funny way of making up their own mind about this stuff. And when it comes to, people actually being fearful and frightened, they tend to do a few things. They down tools, which is what's happening now. They don't do the nice stuff, the volunteer stuff, like going to hotels and restaurants and concerts and things like that. Or maybe spend their money, they hoard it. However, they have to go to work, they have to get on buses, they have to get on trains. And what happens if there's more schools closed and suddenly you're faced as a parent with 2 weeks off work involuntarily, and your employer says, oh, well, here, hold on a second, you're self-isolating, we're not paying you. It's things like that, and when it hits people in their pockets, that's going to have severe ramifications on the whole of our economy, really.
Okay, well, with that not very cheery note, we'll say thank you to the three of you for joining us. Miriam?
Well, that's all from us for tonight. We're back again next Tuesday. Until then, from David, myself and everyone on our team, thank you very much for watching, and Eoghan.